Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. I'm Nick Park, and I'm taking us through a series of teachings where we look at the books of the Old Testament and see how Jesus is revealed in each one of those books. Originally, this was contained in a book I wrote about 9 years ago called 40 Days with Jesus in the Old Testament, the Son of God revealed in every book of the Jewish Scriptures. And you can still obtain that from evangelical.ie. But as we're covering it here, we're covering more than 40 days because it's not just one revelation of Jesus in each Old Testament book, it's a number of them. Jesus is the theme of the Old Testament. Now, yesterday we were in 2 Samuel, and we were talking about Jesus being the builder of the temple, that his kingdom, that Solomon built the temple, the original temple, but that his kingdom would pass away. But the prophecy went on to talk about a son of David whose kingdom would last forever, which of course is Jesus. Now, just as Solomon was the builder of the temple, Jesus is also the builder of a greater temple. You see, Solomon's temple was impressive, but it wasn't eternal. It was destroyed in 586 BC by the Babylonians, and the people were carried off into captivity, and then 70 years later they returned to their land, and the temple was rebuilt in 515 BC, and that's where you have the books of Haggai and Ezra and Nehemiah. It was enlarged by King Herod, who added some bits onto it, but then that temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. And in fact, if you ever go to Rome and you go to look at the Colosseum, everybody knows the Colosseum and what it looks like and instantly recognizes it. But if you're going to see the Colosseum, don't rush past the big arch that stands beside it. It looks a little bit like an older version of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. But that arch is worth stopping and looking at because that is the Arch of Titus. And that is the arch that was built to commemorate his victory and that of his father Vespasian over the Jews, over the Jewish rebellion, and particularly the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. So, the Colosseum is inspiring, and it's all to do with Christian martyrs and everything else, but don't miss the Arch of Titus, because that's an integral testimony to biblical history. Anyway, the temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, and today if you go to Jerusalem, and I've been to the Temple Mount and stood, and there's a big mosque where the temple used to be. There is close by, if you down below it, there's the Western Wall, which is where people go and pray, and they write the prayers on little bits of paper and slip them between the stones. But the Western Wall was simply a retaining wall. It wasn't actually the wall of the temple. It was a retaining wall that held up the flat area where the temple was built. So the temple was destroyed. Solomon's temple was destroyed. It was rebuilt. It was destroyed again. And some people get all worked up about another physical temple being built in the same place. But actually, the greatest temple that is being built is already under construction. And that's the temple that Jesus is building, because Jesus is building a temple that is far greater than the temple that Solomon built. And the revelation of Solomon as the builder of the temple in 2 Samuel 7 is looking forward to Jesus as the builder of the greater temple. And we read about that in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 19 to 22. Paul says, "Consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Jesus Christ himself as the chief cornerstone. In him the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in him you two are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit." Jesus is both the builder and the cornerstone of the living temple, of which Solomon's construction of a temple in Jerusalem was only a faint shadow. God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.